He is gone. But the signal was never meant for the world. It was for the marked ones. The Pope has died, and only those who carry the frequency understood the true reason. The world reacted with global commotion. But within you, there was silence. A silence that seemed to whisper name. It was not a loss. It was a portal. An ancient energetic exchange that only the illuminated recognize. You felt the weight in the air, but you could not name its source. It was as if time itself paused for a moment and you heard something that was not there. No one spoke of it. No one explained. But something inside of you whispered, "This was for me." Because this was no ordinary death. This departure carried invisible codes, and many walked right past them. But you could not ignore it. Since that announcement, a strange feeling has lingered with you. A blend of reverence and urgency, as though the heavens themselves had sent a summons. And the question begins to echo, what truly died with him, and what was awakened? The sky felt quieter, the night heavier. The air grew dense, as if the planet had held its breath. But this was not merely a global event. It was a whisper with intention, an echo sent only to those already carrying the code. And you felt it. Since childhood, that face appeared on screens, on altars, in your grandmother's masses. You did not understand everything, but there was something in his gaze, as if those eyes did not belong to that body, as if something else was watching you through him, and always in silence. Beneath the white robes, there was a frequency, a kind of silence that was not peace. And though his words spoke of love, blessing, and faith, the field around him resonated with another tone, as if he knew something, as if he held a secret that could not be spoken, as if, somehow, he too was a guardian, but not of the light, and not of truth. You may not have realized it, but when you looked at him, something within you shifted. A subtle discomfort in your stomach, a gentle chill along your spine, a desire to look, and at the same time, to look away. Because even without understanding, your soul recognized it. It recognized the symbol, the figure, the portal. For years you ignored that inner calling. You believed it was nothing more than suspicion, but it was never rational. It was spiritual. It was an ancient memory being reactivated each time that white mantle appeared. A memory without shape yet heavy with meaning. And now that he is gone, the memory burns more vividly. Because what departed was not just a man. It was a signal closing. And another, opening. You felt it, even if you cannot explain it. Even if you remain in silence. But what was he truly representing? You only know as the frequency changed? In your childhood, you saw altars, saints, and crosses. But something inside you would respond, silently, deeply. It was not fear. It was memory. A sensation beyond explanation, as if something ancient were trying to return. While other children recited prayers they did not understand, you felt the atmosphere, the vibration, the gaze of figures that looked like statues but pierced right through you. They said you were too sensitive, that you were impressionable, dramatic, imaginative, but it was none of that. You were an open field, a living radar. That is why everything entered you, including what others could not see. The blessed hands laid upon your head did not always carry light. Some touches felt hollow. Some gazes carried a weight your body could not interpret, only absorb. And then came the symptoms. Heaviness in your shoulders, overwhelming sleep, nighttime fears, sorrow with no explanation. No one noticed. But your field was already being marked. Because the illuminated does not need to understand with the mind, they feel with the body. And you were already feeling, even if you had no name for it. They thought you were fragile, that you cried too easily, that you startled without reason. But you were not fragile. You were exposed, open, far too vulnerable for a world already thick with codes and interference. You saw beyond what the eyes could show. The ritual gave you chills. The music was not merely melodiet, was a frequency that pierced through your chest. The white garments at the altar did not bring peace. They brought questions, and the silence of churches was never empty. It was thick, charged, and at times, suffocating. That is why you were marked so early, because you saw too much, because you remembered. And those who remember too soon are the ones they most try to silence. But what is true never remains silent for long. While your soul searched for light, your mind was flooded with false promises. From a very young age, you were exposed to easy pleasures, artificial stimuli, ready-made ideas that looked like answers but were only distractions. Distractions dressed as freedom, as self-discovery, as happiness. But it was never truly you making the choice. It was the world trying to occupy you, to fill your time, to fill your body, to consume your energy, so that silence would never return, so that the sacred would never be remembered. Bodies, screens, addictions, dogmas, everything came toward you. Everything felt urgent, but all of it was noise. The illuminated one feels this. They are not addicted to pleasure. They are addicted to the absence of meaning, to the constant sensation that something is missing, and the world seems to offer substitute after substitute. But nothing truly fills the void. Meanwhile, the symbols of the divine remained hidden. In gestures no one could explain. In gazes that moved through crowds. In stories that seemed sacred but had been distorted. You grew up distracted, programmed not to remember, not to feel, not to stop. Because if you stopped, you would remember, you would feel, you would see. And that has always been the system's greatest fear, the awakening of an illuminated one. The Pope died, and the world paused for a moment. But the signal was not about him. It was about you. It was within that global silence that something inside you awakened. You realized that pleasure never fulfilled you, that dogmas never truly explained. And now, at last, you are beginning to decode the signs. They taught you how to speak to God, but never how to listen. They wanted you to memorize prayers, repetitions, mantras, but they never told you that the true gift lives in the silence between the words. They wanted you to pray but not to feel. They taught you fear, guilt, submission. But no one showed you presence, because presence awakens truth, and truth sets you free. Since childhood, you were told that energy was sin, that it was dangerous to feel pleasure, vibration, inner strength. And so, you began to hide your light, to shrink, to yield, to silence yourself in the name of a false holiness. But the illuminated was not born to vanish. They were born to remember. You began to feel again. The energy started to flow once more, but now you do not waste it. You have learned to hold it, to contain it, to transmute it. Because this is not repression, it is mastery. When you hold, you command. When you breathe, you guide. When you feel, without running, you become a channel. Your body is an altar no one ever introduced you to, an ancient, vibrant temple that pulses when you align, and it is pulsing again. It is reactivating, because containment created space for reconnection. You used to pour your energy out to be accepted. Now, you emanate energy simply by being. The illuminated one does not offer their light to just any altar. They hold it within, because now they know the sacred does not live outside. It dwells at the center of their own being. Your heart races without reason. Your skin bristles without touch. Your throat tightens in the middle of silence, and you do not know why. It is as though something is being reconfigured within you, as though your body itself is becoming a spiritual radar, a mirror of another reality. You walk into a space, and the candles tremble. The lights flicker. People look, but they do not know what they are feeling. You did not either, not until now. It is not madness. It is vibration. It is your field. From that day forward, from that announcement, something shifted in the air. The news of death was not just a headline. It was a released code, a subtle wave that moved through the bodies of the awakened. Some ignored it, others fell ill, but you felt it, even without knowing what you were feeling. The energy rose, as if something had been unlocked, as if a password had been entered in your DNA. The frequency of the illuminated began to expand. Ancient codes, forgotten memories, dormant gifts, all began to vibrate within a body that was already prepared but had not yet remembered. And you tried to carry on as if nothing had changed, but nothing felt the same. Your eyes began to see differently. Your touch sensed more. The presence of others felt heavier. or more transparent. The truth is, the world did not change. What changed was your field, and now every particle responds to it. The death of the Pope was not an ending, it was a release, a rupture, a permission. Because when the system falls, the seals open, and the energy rises without resistance. You started to avoid certain paths. Churches that once welcomed you now made you uneasy. Words repeated without soul. Rituals that felt empty. Prayers that once calmed you now echoed as noise. It was not a phase. It was not rebellion. It was discernment. Your soul was not walking away from God. It was walking away from the distractions placed between you and Him. Faith became silence, and silence became revelation. You felt it. You felt that the quieter you became, the more you could hear what had never been spoken. You understood that the sacred needs no microphone, no crowd. The sacred is a vibration that pulses when you stop searching outside. What once felt like loneliness was protection. The universe was hiding you in order to remake you. And when you began to truly see, you sensed the weight of the wrong portals. Places where the frequency was low, where the symbols were inverted, where the name of God was spoken but the energy did not reach. And everything changed. You no longer trusted titles, or robes, or sermons. Because you learned that not every man in white carries light. Every altar connects to the divine. You remained silent, but within, the sound of truth grew louder. Your presence began to speak more than your words, and people noticed. But they did not understand. They thought you had changed, that you had grown cold, distant. But it was the opposite. You had drawn closer to something they still could not see. The silence that entered your life was not absence. It was direction. It was the sign that the frequency had shifted, and those who no longer resonated with you simply faded away. Now, you no longer need external symbols. You are the symbol. Your presence does not persuade, it transforms. You enter a space, and something changes. Without saying a word, without needing to explain. Some are drawn to you as if mesmerized. Others pull away, not knowing why. But deep down, it is the same reason. They feel something that took you years to understand. The quiet light of the Illuminated. You do not need to raise your voice. You do not need to correct anyone. You do not preach. You vibrate. And that vibration no longer asks for permission. It cuts through. It reveals. It unsettles. While others chase applause, you carry silence. But it is a silence that burns, that activates, that dismantles what is false. That is why conversations shift when you arrive. Why eyes avoid yours. Why environments try to adjust but cannot. Your energy no longer tries to fit in. It now clears, recalibrates. Your field became a compass, your body, a temple. And that is why some cannot bear to look into your eyes. Because the eyes of the illuminated do not plead. They reveal. You carry within you what temples try to imitate, what sermons attempt to convey but cannot. You are what religion tried to decode, what altars hope to represent. But the signal was never meant for temples. The signal was meant for you. And now, everyone can feel it. Death is not the end. Sometimes, it is only the bell that awakens the sleeping. When he passed, many wept. Others did not even notice. But you felt something. It was not sorrow. It was not longing. It was like a warm breath inside a cold room. A signal that came not from the screen, but from the soul. The Pope departed. But something entered the atmosphere in that moment. It was not a headline. It was a vibration. And those who carry the frequency recognized it at once. Not by what was said, but by what could not be said. You perceived a different silence. Heavier, older. As if a message had pierced the veil without passing through words. A code. An echo. Calling. It was never about the man. It was about the throne. About all that had been built upon the sacred. And all that is now crumbling. Many looked at the image, the casket, the ritual. But you saw something else. You sensed that the body no longer held anything. The power had already moved on. The symbol had been emptied. Because when consciousness moves, temples tremble. And in that moment, the truly illuminated do not mourn. They awaken. Because they know that certain deaths do not bring endings. They open, they rupture, they announce. The vibration of the planet shifted in that very moment, not because a spiritual leader had departed, but because a frequency had broken. And when a structure breaks, those with eyes can see. Those with skin can feel. Those who carry the mark, remember. There is no longer time to follow symbols blindly. The signal has been given, and it was not for the followers. It was for those who are ready. You do not need permission. You do not need baptism, nor a veil, nor approval. You arrived with all of that already within you. And now, you are being called back to the center. Not to an altar, but to the place where your soul remembers, where everything pulses, where nothing needs to be explained. The truth is not in the words he once spoke. It is in the silence that remained after. And what you felt was not mourning. It was activation. So tell me, Illuminated One, what was it that you saw in that moment? Perhaps you cannot explain. Perhaps you cannot even put it into words. But something within you was touched. A hidden thread was lit. And from that moment on, nothing sounded the same again. What once felt distant now pulses from within, as if his death had awakened something long asleep in your very soul. You heard the signal. Now, it is your turn to respond.